Which is better, Edward or Edward Shumsky? Today's similarly themed tale is fascinating. I was lucky to grow up in a standard family. Sadly, my mother faced a difficult childbirth and was unable to have more children after my arrival. Consequently, she poured all her love into me. I grew up as a happy child, surrounded by my parents' love. However, their affection wasn't suffocating. They knew I could end up being a completely spoiled narcissist, poorly prepared for real-life challenges. We had many examples of such individuals around us, and my parents did their utmost to equip me with the skills to manage my own life. My mother signed me up for various clubs and sections, which I frequently left soon after joining. However, in the 7th grade at a pioneer camp, I picked up a guitar and instantly adored it. That fall, I asked my mum to enroll me in a music studio to learn guitar playing. Considering my brief enthusiasm in clubs before, she was skeptical about my commitment, but ultimately agreed and paid for a 6-month course. After graduating from high school, I joined the army, convinced that the experience would be beneficial later on. When I completed my military duty, I came back home as a sergeant major. Surprisingly, a girl awaited my return in my hometown. Truthfully, I had not anticipated her waiting for me instead of marrying a wealthy man, but she had indeed waited. It took nearly a month to recuperate from my military duties before I took a job at a machine tool factory as a turner. At the same time, I was attending Polytechnic University part-time, aiming to become a mechanical engineer. Naturally, I married the girl I loved. We got married on December 6th, and by September, Michelle, my wife, delivered our son, whom we named Edward, after myself. Michelle was the distinct name of my cherished wife. A year into our marriage, she was finishing her studies at a construction college and planning to pursue further education at a specialized university. My wife was determined and ambitious. We lived on an ordinary income, neither poor nor wealthy. I worked at the factory and occasionally played at a restaurant in the evenings to supplement our family income. I helped Michelle with the baby when I could sometimes. I warmed the baby's food in hot water and dozed off with my head on the dining table. As time went on, my son grew older and Michelle prepared for exams. In August, she traveled to the capital city, and a week later I found out she had passed her entrance exams and was admitted to the university. I then decided to stop my studies to enable Michelle to pursue hers. While Michelle was engrossed in her studies, I took on roles typically done by mothers. I washed diapers, took our son to doctor's appointments, and managed our household. I intentionally sacrificed my career so Michelle could pursue her dream of becoming a civil engineer. Eventually, Michelle received her diploma and came back to our hometown. By then, our son was 6 and starting school. Michelle got a job at a design firm which quickly became a thriving construction company. Indeed, Michelle was not just skilled but also a talented engineer. 5 years later, she became the deputy director of capital construction, and a few years after that, she was promoted to vice president of the company and acquired a 30% stake. Michelle transitioned from a modest girl to a prosperous businesswoman. I continued to work as a turner and occasionally played in restaurants, still pursuing my unfulfilled dream of becoming a musician. The years flew by like a swift train. When the time came, Edward finished high school and was preparing for university. He decided to become a mechanical engineer as I had. My wife efficiently managed her company and had secured a strong position on the board of directors. Additionally, she had been recently trying to handle our family affairs. Lately, Michelle frequently encouraged me to change professions, subtly suggesting she was unhappy with our life with a simple machinist, a man outside her social circle. At one point, she strongly suggested I join her company, but I steadfastly refused to change anything in my life. At the office, I felt satisfied my peers acknowledged me as an outstanding professional, and playing music at night filled my heart with happiness. My son's accomplishments brought me joy as well. It's important to note the close relationship I shared with my son. He revealed all his mysteries and secrets to me. He first shared with me about his girlfriend and how their relationship evolved into deep love. The girl was indeed attractive, though she had one shortcoming: she was an orphan. When Michelle found out, it led to a disagreement at home. "It's your fault you indulge Edward excessively. What sort of girl is she?" "A lowly one." "My son is worthy of better, someone from a notable family. Our friends have appropriate daughters for Edward." Or would you prefer he ends up a simple worker like you? In response, I quietly stood up and exited the room. I advised my son, make your own choice. You are mature now, and it's your life. Whatever decision you make, I will back you. Sometimes I joined my wife at social events, but I always felt like an outsider among the well-dressed men and women who regarded me with scorn. Eventually, Michelle realized I didn't belong, and she stopped taking me along. By that time, we had relocated to a rural home, but soon after, Edward moved to the capital, leaving our home empty. Alone with my wife, I turned 46 while Michelle was 45. For her 45th birthday, she planned an extravagant celebration. She leased the city's most exquisite restaurant for the evening and invited her social circle. At the banquet hall entrance, my wife and I welcomed the guests. Actually, she greeted while I simply collected the gifts and passed them to her aides. I immediately noticed him, a young man dressed in a refined cream suit that suited his athletic figure, his sun-tanned complexion accentuated by blonde hair. He wore lavish cologne and gave me a disdainful, mocking look. He admired Michelle, held her hand during his toast, stared into her eyes, then kissed her fingers and gently squeezed her hand. Then, turning towards me authoritatively, he commented, "Your wife is delightful. Take good care of her." He nodded dismissively and continued to the next guests. Observing my wife, her eyes sparkled with excitement. Seeing my confused look, she deigned to clarify, "This is our client, Edward Chomsky. We're building a residential complex for him." However, she appeared lost in her thoughts throughout the night, roaming among her admirers with Chomsky always nearby. They chatted pleasantly, danced, and socialized with the guests. It seemed as if Michelle had forgotten she had a husband. I eagerly awaited the end of the party. From my corner, I watched as Michelle warmly said goodbye to Chomsky at the exit. That was the moment I realized I was losing my wife. One cannot fool the heart. Their relationship was more than just client and contractor. A month after my wife's birthday, as I came home from work, a large black car was parked outside our house. A man and a woman were intensely kissing by the car. She wrapped her arms around his neck, their lips locked. I wasn't surprised to see the woman was my wife and her companion was undoubtedly Mr. Chomsky. Suddenly, Michelle saw me and quickly pulled away from her companion, Edward. "Are you?" she exclaimed in shock. I took her hand. "Michelle, let's go home." I tried to lead my wife away. "Buddy, can't you see she doesn't want to go with you?" Chomsky said mockingly and scornfully. 2 bodyguards appeared from behind him. "Let the woman go and leave," he ordered threateningly. Michelle stayed silent. "And you, don't forget she is my wife." I tried to stay calm, but soon Chomsky's guards approached me from both sides, and I reacted. I released Michelle's hand, spun around, and with my right foot I kicked one of the guards in the kneecap while also tripping him. The large figure fell heavily to the ground. I turned sharply towards the second, and moving to my left, I punched him in the nose with my right fist. The guard flew sideways, his head hitting the side of the car. From the corner of my eye, I saw the driver attempting to exit the car with a baseball bat. I threw the door open, and the audacious man collapsed onto the seat, holding his bleeding nose. It all happened so quickly that the couple barely understood what occurred. Chomsky looked at me, his face open in shock, horrified, expecting me to confront him. Michelle clung to his arm. "Edward, go home. I'll be right behind," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Please, no violence." I turned and walked into the house. In the kitchen, as I attempted to serve myself some vodka, my trembling hands forced me to drink directly from the bottle. Michelle emerged in the doorway. "We need to talk," she declared. "Indeed we do, Edward." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I've met someone and I've fallen for him. We've been seeing each other for 6 months. I can no longer hide this from you. I'm leaving to be with him. I'll explain everything to our son. I believe I deserve some joy. You're a good person, but we're stagnant. Nothing moves forward with you, honestly. It's tedious." She paused once more, waiting for my reaction, but I remained silent. "I need someone ambitious, someone with common interests," she resumed, but I interrupted her sobbing words. "Don't bother explaining, it's clear. Go on." I rose to my feet. "Is that all you want to say?" Michelle appeared deeply distressed. "What more is there to say? Love and guidance." I eyed the bottle. "I'm leaving now. You can stay. This place is yours too." Michelle continued speaking. "We can stay amicable." After 25 years together, we're not strangers. I'm sorry. I glanced at the remaining vodka and exited the house without uttering another word. Holding on to Michelle was pointless. It was clear there was no reason to. They say you must battle for love, yet love either exists or it doesn't. All else is just emotional triviality. It's sorrowful about the years lost, yet I wasn't drunk, didn't fall into numbness. The sole emotion I felt was bitterness. I couldn't understand how she could abandon someone after such a long time together. Clearly, I didn't meet her expectations in terms of education, manners, or pretense. I never went to college. Why linger on what's past? There was no reversing, and what was the point? It was easier to dismiss that period of my life and begin afresh. At 46, life wasn't finished. That evening, I stayed at my parents' home. I didn't divulge much of my predicament, and they asked little. My mother was understandably upset, yet she gave me room. I hardly slept that night, smoking at the window, savoring the blend of cigarette smoke and chilly air, and organizing my thoughts. The following morning, Edward called me. "Dad, are you divorced?" His tone was anxious. "What, did you go on a spree?" "Dad, act your age. Speak to your mum, make amends. She'll pardon you. She cares for you, Edward. It's more complicated than that. It's not just about me. She's with someone else." His voice was laden with sorrow and frustration, making me internally cringe. "Son, don't judge too harshly. She remains your mother, regardless. She adores you. What transpired concerns only our marriage. I did my utmost to console him. We're together in this, you and I. Everything affecting you affects me. You've grown up in my care, and I won't abandon you over this." Edward couldn't continue, overwhelmed by rage. "Dad, stay strong. She isn't worth your anguish. I'll come over soon." Then Michelle rang. "Edward, why all this drama? You're grown. You must face reality as it unfolds. Why bicker?" she began in her commanding voice. "Why did you leave? This home is yours too." "I didn't expel you." I blacked out. It was too much to bear. Michelle persistently phoned. Eventually, I shut off the device. 2 days later, some news arrived. "Dad, I was at Mum's." I attempted to discuss things with her, but she referred to this as her life. She confessed she's open with her beloved. That's how she put it. "Lover, what's the reason? Why is she inflicting this on us?" he ended, tears streaming down his face. Her boyfriend just smirked, then embraced her, consumed by emotions. "I have no mother anymore. I despise her." I didn't attempt to sway his judgment. I left him to decide for himself. 2 months later, we finalized our divorce. 6 months after, Michelle wed Mr. Shumsky. She sought to reconnect with Edward, but he ignored her calls. Their marriage was a grand affair that celebrated in the town's most extravagant restaurant. Mr. Shumsky enjoyed a splendid turnout at the wedding. A multitude of guests, renowned pop artists, and the crème de la crème of society were present, yet it was said that the bride's mother spent the entire time in tears and departed prematurely with her father. The son chose not to attend, despite Michelle's considerable efforts to persuade him, even with Mr. Shumsky himself visiting Edward to request his mother's support. On the night of the bustling wedding, I wandered through the paths of a deserted old park. Darkness was setting and the cold northern breeze was attempting to strip the clinging yellow leaves from the damp asphalt. The street lamps flickered on. My pace was slow on the rain-dampened pavement, casting my shadow from one lamp to the next like a bat. I was overwhelmed with nausea, repulsed by the years spent with a deceitful partner. Surprisingly, I was serene, devoid of despair or remorse. Life's matrimonial lessons were harsh, yet the future remained uncertain. At 46, I still had youth on my side. I hadn't made plans, but change was necessary. Breaking free from habitual servitude is challenging. Throughout my marriage, I depended on my wife for handling our significant decisions. It was simpler that way. Now she was building a life with another. Did I cherish Michelle? Indeed, and most painfully I still do, despite all my pretense. The reality was, she was now another's wife, luckier and wealthier by her last account. There was much to discuss, undeniably. I yearned for Michelle, her gaze, her touch, her form. Our intimacy persisted until the end. Those last 6 months, another man had invisibly joined our conjugal bed. She spent that final night beside me, out of proximity, not affection, her heart belonging to another, her mind on his allure. I kissed her, inadvertently tasting the traces of his endearment. I could envision their mockery, how revolting it was, yet she suggested we stay friends as winter approached. My son rang. "Dad, I'm getting married." His tone brimmed with enthusiasm for Natasha, the girl from the orphanage. "Congratulations, I'm pleased you've made this decision," I responded, quietly anticipating more information. "Dad, you're invited to the wedding. It'll be a modest ceremony with just a few close friends, including you. Natasha looks forward to meeting you. The wedding is set for December 6th. Thanks, Edward. I'll make sure to be there." My joy for my son was immense, hoping all would be well for him. "Dad," Edward resumed after a pause, "your former partner won't be there. I didn't invite her. I prefer not to see her." Edward resolutely avoided calling her mother. "Edward, she adores you. She remains your mother." I attempted to mediate. "What does our conflict with her matter, Dad? We've already settled this. Let's avoid dwelling on distressing subjects. Come, Natasha and I are eager for your arrival." My son ended the call. The phone continued to ring, as if the caller knew I was present, and patiently awaited my response. "Hello," I answered groggily. "Edward, this is a courteous woman's voice. I'm representing Inga," she conveyed in such a way that the mere mention of the name filled me with excitement, although it held no significance to me. After a brief silence, I was about to hang up when she added, "Could you meet at Solid Bank at 12? I glanced at the clock. It was already 12:20. "I can't," I responded. "Why not?" she inquired innocently. "Because there's no need. I'm not interested in a loan from your bank, and the name Inge means nothing to me. You haven't introduced yourself either." "My apologies. I'm Jean, Inga's aide. She wishes to discuss a potential job with you." A job? I was taken aback. "I'm already employed, Edward. Visiting the bank commits you to nothing. A vehicle will collect and return you. The choice is yours." Jean's tone was comforting. This might be a fresh start. I pondered what Inga might propose. Surely not a managerial role. Jean, a blonde-haired young woman in a notably short skirt, greeted me. I briefly admired her well-formed legs clad in beige stockings. "Hello," Edward. Her eyes gleamed with sincere happiness as I entered. Inga was waiting inside, behind a massive oak door labeled Manager. Her office, styled in contemporary fashion, featured a large desk where a middle-aged woman in a dark green business suit was seated. Upon noticing me, she offered a smile, repositioning a lock of her white hair on her brow. "Hello, Edward. Come in and take a seat." "Tea? Coffee? No thanks. I just had a meal," I replied, adopting an apathetic tone to vex the woman in charge. Nonetheless, she remained undisturbed by my attitude. "Before we begin, I'd like you to view a brief video." She activated her computer and a monochrome clip started playing on a large display to our left, depicting me dispersing Mr. Shumsky's security on the sidewalk. My gaze turned questioningly towards the banker. "This is from a camera outside your house. I'm acquainted with your neighbor, who graciously shared this footage with me. To my knowledge, Mr. Shumsky hasn't pressed any charges against you." My goodness, her audacity. Is she trying to coerce me? That was my initial suspicion. Ina beamed. "Mr. Zagorski, my purpose here isn't to coerce you. I intend to offer you a role." It appeared she had foreseen my reaction. I kept silent. "A role as my personal protector. I am going through a difficult time and need a reliable person by my side." Her smile was weary. Looking at the film again, she gave a nod. "You appear adept at handling it. And what makes you think I am?" "Reliable. I've done some investigating on you. I also know your ex-wife, Michelle Zagorski, to an extent. Mrs. Shumsky, the banker, held a thin blue dossier. She recommended you to me." I began to fume. "That's insufficient to qualify as a socialite's protector. Absolutely not. I require no recommendations." The office leader rose. "I'm not compelling you. Think about it until tomorrow. If you decide, contact me." She pushed a card towards me with her fingertip, sliding it across the polished surface. I observed her with respect. Certainly a suit would be fitting, and you could have worn a longer skirt the next morning. I rang a simple number. "Yes," a familiar voice answered. "I agree. When do I start?" "Right now. A vehicle awaits you outside your house." The banker seemed taken aback. I glanced outside to see a substantial black Lexus with tinted windows at the top of the driveway. And so I began my tenure as the personal guard of Ina Gerber, the executive at Solid Bank. I resigned from my previous job. My former employers were hesitant to let me go. Engineers are abundant, yet skilled turners are not. However, I insisted, and eventually they released me at my insistence. At my farewell, they assured me they would welcome my return should I change my mind. I also attended my son's nuptials. It was a modest affair, attended only by a few friends of Natasha and Edward, along with myself. We convened in a cafe, enjoyed a few beverages, and departed around 10 p.m. The event went smoothly except for a slight incident. Towards the end of the evening, an elegantly dressed unknown young man approached our group. Edward Zagorski, he respectfully introduced himself to my son, Mrs. Shumsky sends her best wishes for your marriage. He presented Edward with an envelope. Silence enveloped our table. Edward was the first to respond. Kindly tell Mrs. Shumsky that I decline gifts from strangers. Edward looked my way. The man paused momentarily with the envelope in hand, then nodded, tucked the unopened present into his jacket, and left. For a brief moment I thought I saw Michelle at the far end of the hall. My heart skipped a beat. I pondered if I still had feelings for her. After congratulating the newlyweds, I returned home that evening. I was granted only a single day off and had to resume work the next day. Frankly, I had only a rough idea about my new role. I shared this openly with the head of bank security, who clarified that my position was less that of a bodyguard and more of a companion to Mrs. Gerber. I was to be with her consistently and accompany her to both business and social engagements. Her physical security would be managed by other specially trained staff. He presented me with a plastic access card and a Glock 18 handgun with a laminated authorization in my name. Before starting my duties, I visited drug and psychiatric clinics where I secured certificates affirming I was neither mentally unstable nor an alcoholic. When I showed these to the security chief, he grinned. I had no doubts. Yet procedures must be followed. He placed the car keys before me. You must live in Inga's residence, be present there continuously, and escort her to work and any other location she specifies. The chief rose and offered me his hand, saying good luck. The night before my first day, I went to the barber, got a shave, and arranged my attire. In the morning, I woke up early, put on black jeans, a white shirt, and a loose black tweed jacket spacious enough to hide the holster under my arm. I wore my black shoes, picked up my coat, and left for work. Up to that point, everything was going well for me. I had been staying in my friend's apartment while he was abroad for 6 months, and he was due to return in a week. Therefore, living in Inga's house was ideal for me. I got into a black Lexus and drove to the crossroad of the avenue and the street that leads to the affluent cottage village where I had once lived with Michelle. The intersection offered a breathtaking view of the pine-covered ancient city park, but I looked away indifferently from the snow-covered pines, turned right, and proceeded to the home of the bank manager. 30 minutes later, I reached the house. The gate was slightly open. I pulled up to the mansion, parked, and got out of the car. I walked towards a 2-story mansion, tucked away in an ancient park. Being cautious, I climbed the frosty steps. It was quite early, and the caretaker hadn't yet cleaned them or spread sand and salt. I pressed the doorbell, and shortly after, the door opened to reveal a sleepy, tall, young blonde woman. Her luxurious golden blonde hair flowed in waves down her shoulders. Her prominent breasts were visible under a deeply cut corsage. Her narrow waist, full hips, and long legs created an undeniable silhouette. Her piercing blue eyes left me somewhat dazed. The pause extended, and the blonde was the first to break it. "Who are you looking for?" she inquired sleepily, her hand covering a yawn. "Good morning, I'm here to see someone. Are you marketing something?" The maid looked at me defiantly. "Forgive me, I was momentarily captivated by your appearance. Are you satisfied now?" "Actually, I'm quite taken," I admitted, pulling a pass from my pocket. "I'm Edward Zagorski. I'm supposed to start working here." She regarded me with skepticism. "There's no need for such enthusiasm," I remarked, offering a reassuring smile. "May I come in?" "Yes," she motioned towards the living room. "Wait here, I'll notify the hostess you're here." "What was your name again?" "Zagorski, Edward Zagorski." "Valentina," she said, introducing herself before exiting the room, her hips swaying. Valentina returned shortly. "Your hostess will see you now." She guided me to a door. I turned the knob and entered a long, narrow room dimmed by heavy drapes. Ina stood in the center of the room, her gaze fixed out the only uncurtained window. I paused for a moment, adjusting to the dim light. The woman turned towards me. "Hello, Edward," her voice was low and hoarse. "Are you prepared to begin your duties?" "Yes," I faced the hostess. "Were you informed that you would be staying here?" She seemed to overlook my response. "Any reservations?" "No reservations." "Can someone show me to my room?" "Certainly." "Valentina, take Edward to his room." My room was on the second floor, quite spacious with a massive oak table, a large, comfortable leather armchair, and a big bed. Opposite the table, on the wall, was a fireplace with 2 antique guns above it. A knight statue and several books were on the table. Valentina stood by the doorway, watching me intently. "If you need anything, just inform me." "Breakfast is in 15 minutes." Valentina managed to conceal her curiosity. "That will be all for now, thank you. Could you show me where the dining room is?" I offered a slight smile and looked at the maid. Valentina blushed and led the way without waiting for an answer, lifting her short skirt as she went down the stairs. "You did everything possible to make me argue with my son," Michelle said furiously, her face red with anger. "You still fail to recognize that he is my child as well. Please settle down and lower your voice." I attempted to maintain composure. Michelle had somehow acquired my address and showed up at my doorstep late the previous evening, clearly ready to make a commotion. I had little desire to engage in a dispute with her and contemplated not even answering the door, but then I acknowledged that her loudness would disrupt the whole household. "Michelle, let's talk about what's troubling you. What is it you expect from me? To mend the relationship with your son. But that's on you," I stated evenly, making an effort to keep my tone even. "I haven't spoken a word to Edward. It was you who let him witness you being touched inappropriately by your lover right in front of your child. What do you seek from me?" At this point I spoke evenly, striving to keep my voice steady, yet he not only excluded me from his wedding, but also turned away the present I offered. Michelle seemed on the brink of weeping, standing there in an elegant evening gown, draped in a luxurious fur, the well-kept young woman who was once my spouse. "And what about these antics? You declined the job I proposed at my company, yet you accepted when Ina suggested it. Were you involved with her? Is she your companion? I better not catch sight of her. I'll snatch her by the hair." Michelle could no longer hold back her feelings. "Michelle, surely you recall that you were the one who cheated on me with Shamsky for half a year, that you were the one who left me callously for your lover, that you watched without concern as his thugs tried to rough me up. You have no right to lay claims on me." I looked at her squarely. "Regarding your son, that's for you to figure out. He's grown and makes his own choices about who he wants in his life. Now go. I need to be up for work tomorrow." It seemed to me that as Michelle walked away, she tried to mask a look of regret. My work was by no means strenuous. In the morning, I escorted my partner to the main office of Banks's. By noon, I followed her to a cafe where I lingered while she sipped coffee and conversed with acquaintances, myself pretending to be absorbed in a periodical at an adjacent table. Afterwards, we'd head back to her workplace, and I'd essentially have the rest of the day at my disposal. In the evening, I'd collect Inga, and we'd drive to her residence. Initially, the host's acquaintances regarded me with interest, but she quickly made it known I was nothing more than an accessory, and the woman stopped acknowledging me. Once home, the hostess would dine and withdraw to her quarters, while I spent my nights in solitude, watching TV and quietly strumming the guitar. Work was akin to a holiday. With my free time, I drove to the university to discuss returning to my studies. It turned out the dean of the mechanical department was a long-standing acquaintance. We had served in the military together and later crossed paths professionally. Dean was willing to assist, and within a couple of days he informed me I could rejoin the 5th year on a part-time basis. I merely had to sit the exams for the subjects I had started but not finished. A friend came through for me once more, and before long I had my marks and a part-time student's identification. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but by the end of the first month I felt so exhausted and uninterested that I contemplated leaving my position. As I headed to the office in the morning, I was on the verge of announcing my resignation. As Inga laid her hand on my shoulder, "Edward, do you possess a suitable suit?" "Regrettably, no. I've never had the occasion to buy one. I never had a purpose to don one in the rearview mirror. I caught her expression of surprise lifting her brows. Strange, why didn't you and your partner go to social events? My ex-wife, I clarified, did perfectly well without my presence. Moreover, for the past half year of our union, she had another to escort her to such events. The hostess paused briefly, contemplating the next step. We should go shopping to get you outfitted. You need some clothes. She fell silent once more. The boutique princess was just by the bank. As we stepped in, a youthful saleswoman approached us swiftly, almost jogging. It's wonderful to see you. Are you in search of attire for yourself? She inquired brightly. Another time, Ira. Today I'm here to outfit a young man. Ina grasped my arm, subtly showing the saleswoman we were together. The saleswoman, Ira, gave a knowing nod. We have some sophisticated selections. I'll bring them to you shortly. In a bit, Ira and her colleague presented several suits for men. This one comes highly recommended, she offered, presenting a black suit with a discreet sheen. The changing room is over there. Via, show him the way. I trailed Via to a small changing area. As I was fitting the suit, a rap at the door sounded. Here, shoes, a white shirt, and a necktie. I took off the jacket, donned the shirt, and tied the necktie. The garments fitted me flawlessly. My reflection showed a middle-aged man with a forlorn look, a figure of solace for the aged. I ponder if she'll consider buying me undergarments as well. Ina also favored my choice when Ira disclosed the cost. The sum nearly floored me, but Ina, unfazed, smoothly surrendered her card, sipped her gratis coffee, and strode out with elegance. I came after, laden with bags. A new bow, recently acquired, I overheard a female voice behind me. Impossible, it's flawless, tinged with jealousy, another retorted. The rest was lost in the clamor of the closing door. En route to the office, I speculated on the necessity of the suit 3649, likely for an upcoming social event, and she intended to bring me. Arriving at the office, Ina instructed me to dress in it today. I've been invited to an art gallery debut. It's an assembly of the city's dignitaries. Declining isn't an option. You're accompanying me as my date. We should arrive by 7 tonight, my hostess declared with an air of finality. Remember to get dressed. She then returned her attention to her laptop, indicating the end of our dialogue. I aided Ina from the vehicle, entrusted the keys to the valet, and offering my arm to the lady, proceeded towards the gallery. Ina was right today, had seen the gathering of the city's crème de la crème. Men escorted their partners, proudly parading them before the upper crust. Women showcased necklaces and bracelets of immense value on their necks and wrists. While the crowd mingled and sipped, they ambled through the gallery, pretending to admire the vibrant masks adorning the walls. Ina and I blended in without effort, and 3754 started to circulate casually in an expansive loop. Edward, fetch me some champagne, Ina directed, her eyes locked on the entrance. My gaze followed. An impressive pair made their entrance. The lady was modest in appearance, but her partner, a dapper middle-aged gentleman in a chic cream suit, about my age, had a bronzed complexion and sharp blue eyes. It was evident that he had minimal patience for his less than appealing companion, yet she shone with diamonds and sported teeth of such a stark whiteness, reminiscent of someone from an aggressive toothpaste advertisement. Ina, her gaze still fixed on the striking pair, took the champagne I handed her without a glance. Briefly, I caught the charmer's eyes settle on her. He gave a broad smile and made his way over with his partner. Greetings, my dear, he said smoothly, kissing Ina's hand with finesse. This is Irena, a friend. His companion with the radiant smile said, giving a small nod as she introduced me to her acquaintance. Ina didn't find it 3906 necessary to introduce herself, and I didn't press the issue. My focus drifted to other figures in the lively crowd. There was Michelle, linked arm in arm with Mr. Shumsky, pausing before paintings. It was clear only Michelle was taken by the art. Mr. Shumsky wore a look of sheer disinterest, his face sullen and impatient, wishing to depart at the earliest. Michelle always seemed to draw the short straw with conversation partners. She was mid-discussion with her husband when she caught sight of me. Her words halted abruptly, while her partner seemed lost, his gaze fixed blankly on the wall. Michelle's eyes darted to Ina, narrowing as though sizing up competition. I pondered who would prevail if they were to be left to their own devices. I pretended not to notice my ex-wife's meaningful glance and stared vacantly at the opposite wall. Then Michelle's voice reached me from behind. "Hey, darling." "It's been ages. What a stunning dress. It really highlights your figure." "Hey, darling." "Lovely to see you," Ina replied, matching Michelle in elegance. The women's kiss was a mere brush of cheeks. "Oh, you're here as well," Michelle remarked nonchalantly. "Can you believe it?" "I hardly ever attended these gatherings," I said. Michelle laughed artificially, her mirth seeming derisive. "Darling, you just never figured it out," Ina commented with a hint of double meaning. "I'll leave you be," Michelle ended, whisking her partner off toward the buffet. For 25 years I had observed my former wife and could discern that she was seething with rage. Ina was in the midst of a heated confrontation. She was clearly chastising him over something. Her complexion was flushed with fury, and at one point she struck him across the face. We were obscured by a column, so the onlookers missed the man's face twist in anger. He was about to retaliate against Inga, but I stepped in, urged calm, and led us away. My voice was firm, almost threatening. The man struggled to release his arm from my grasp, but his efforts were clumsy. I advanced, securing my hold on Inga. "You imbecile," she hissed quietly from behind me. "Our paths will cross again, dear." The man retrieved his arm, collected his oblivious companion adorned with diamonds, and made a swift exit. Tears welled in Ina's eyes. "Edward, fetch me some cognac," she requested softly. "Shall we not drown our woes?" I refrained from asking the reason, as it was not my place. By the evening's end, Inga was thoroughly inebriated. I draped a fur coat over her shoulders and gently guided her by the hand towards the exit. Her heel gave way on the steps, and she nearly tumbled into my embrace. I carefully transported her to the car and settled her in the back seat. On the drive back, I had the suspicion we were being followed by an unfamiliar car. The light in the corridor was on, but the house was empty. I propped his body against the wall and closed the front door. Then I carried her to the second-floor bedroom, where a grand bed lay beneath a white canopy, surrounded by a plethora of feminine trinkets resembling elephants and kittens. The dim lighting and the subtle scent of lavender created an atmosphere of delirium. I accompanied her to the restroom, and then gently laid her on the bed, tucking her in with the blankets. I left the nightlight on. As I neared the door, her voice halted me. "Don't go. Stay." I returned to the expansive bed and sat. Ina turned toward me. "Embrace me," she rested against my shoulder. I shook my head, dispelling the alluring thoughts. Yes, daydreaming is innocuous. Moments later, Inga sniffled. I carefully shifted her hand aside and rolled onto my back. I remained awake for a substantial part of the night, my attire still on. Once confident she was deeply asleep, I silently snuffed out the night light and slipped from the room discreetly. Further adventures were unnecessary for me. In my own room, I activated the kettle and set about preparing coffee. Picking up my guitar, I gently strummed the chords of a slow blues melody. It was the early hours of Saturday. Descending to the kitchen, Aunt Masha presented pancakes drizzled with honey. By the time Valia beckoned me to attend to the mistress, I was indulging in my second helping. Inga presented a troubled sight, her eyes puffy and red, her hands shrouded beneath a downy scarf. "Did you tuck me into bed?" she asked, her gaze averted. "Indeed," I assured, adopting an air of innocence on my visage. I blinked with earnestness and added, "Indeed, but rest assured, I took nothing." "Your attire remains untouched." Inga nearly sputtered on her tea, visibly uncertain about posing the next question. I took the initiative to clarify. "You fell into slumber and dismissed me, nothing more." "You dozed off at once." And I withdrew. Her face was an enigma, wavering between relief and possible disappointment. "Today I wish to journey to the hunting lodge. It lies 150 km away, adjacent to Basinska Forest. I'm prepared, save for a stop to refuel. Exiting the dining area, I proceeded to ready the vehicle. As we departed, I caught the maid in a phone conversation. We reached the single-story pine cabin as evening approached. The scent of dust, moisture, and the raw pine planks of the interior walls greeted us as I heaved open the stout door. The light switch yielded no response. First, I needed to activate the circuit breaker in the cellar. Sensing a breath upon my nape, Inga murmured, "My visits here are infrequent," and upon leaving, I always cut the power to prevent electrical faults. The chill within was noticeably sharper than outside. I'll descend to the cellar and restore power, Inga declared, seizing a cobwebbed flashlight from its perch and easing the groaning cellar door open. She started her careful descent, the weak beam of the lantern casting light upon her path. Meanwhile, kindle the hearth and seek out a beverage. The illumination flickered to life. Inga had found and flipped the breaker. Surveying the space, it was evidently a lounge area. 2 wicker chairs stood sentinel by the hearth, and nearer the window, an oak table held court. Suspended above the mantelpiece was a sizable monochrome photograph depicting a jovial throng of youths, all peering into the camera with mirth. At the core was a girl bearing Inga's likeness, flanked by a buoyant young man, the same charmer from the gallery event, only years younger. The Ina in the image stirred a vague memory of another face I had seen, yet it eluded me. I set a blaze in the hearth of the quaint lounge. Delving into an antiquated cabinet, I unearthed a bottle of cognac, unopened, and 2 pristine glasses. "So, have you mastered it?" Ina's voice, arriving without warning, made me start. The stillness of the abode and the notion of our isolation had swiftly become familiar. I felt akin to a hunter secluded in the wilderness. Darkness enveloped us. The kitchen window framed the towering pines and the icy lake's edge. The wind began to howl across the lake. The silence was so profound that the sound of a heartbeat could become audible. "Charming spot, wouldn't you agree?" Ines murmured, materializing beside me once again. "Hand me some cognac." We transitioned back to the lounge. "Any chance of a radio here? I feel a sudden need to dispel this." Gloom. Inga approached the radio, situated on a diminutive table, and activated it. A nostalgic French ballad from the 60s filled the air, emanating from the speaker. I served up cognac for both Inga and myself, and settled into the wicker chair facing the hearth, glass in tow. Void of thought, my desire was simply to be seated, basking in the fire's glow alongside a woman of beauty and, crucially, of a non-intrusive nature. Inga took her place across from me, equally mute, her gaze fixed on the flames. The vintage tune evoked bygone moments, and my mind inadvertently wandered to a wintry evening spent with Michelle as the new year dawned. Her image prompted a dismissive shake of my head. Her reign over my sentiments had ended. The logs in the hearth had been consumed, leaving behind a smouldering heap of embers. The intensifying wind caused the shutters and windows to clatter. An unsettling howl from the fireplace set me on edge. Inga appeared to tremble from the cold. Abruptly, a thud resounded within the desolate dwelling. I was immobilized. Could it be the front door slamming shut? Has an intruder forced entry in a daze? Ina and I remained seated near the dying fire, attuning to the enveloping dark. Beyond the panes, a tempest raged with fury. With caution, I rose, armed with the fireplace poker, and tiptoed towards the corridor's door. The door swung open abruptly. The key was still inserted in the front door's lock. Blast, I was certain I had secured it. I tested the doorknob. It was indeed locked. Another thud echoed, seemingly from the kitchen's direction. I cautiously wielded the poker and cracked the kitchen door open. Peering inside, it was devoid of presence. Following 2 additional knocks, I observed that a window had succumbed to the wind's onslaught, repeatedly striking the frame. I bore witness to my fear over a triviality, the likes of which are cliché in horror films. Battling the window, which defied closure due to the wind's force, I made my way back to the lounge, poker still in grip. It then struck me that I was carrying a pistol in a holster under my arm, a fact that now filled me with profound embarrassment. It was a stroke of luck that Ina did not witness my countenance at that moment. If we don't replenish the firewood, the hearth will soon grow cold. I shuddered at the thought. I have no desire to brave this storm. Might you gather some logs? They're stacked by the boathouse. The prospect of an overnight stay here was less than enticing, even with the company of a delightful woman, but it seemed there was no choice. I donned my coat and ventured out. I navigated the icy, roughly hewn stone steps down to the boathouse. The boathouse itself was a sturdy edifice, crowned with deer antlers affixed to the gable. Protected under an overhang from the roof, the firewood was meticulously stacked. As I lifted a second log onto my bent left arm, A rustling sound from behind caught my attention. Whirling around, I had no opportunity to dodge the blow that struck my head, sending a sharp pain through my skull, a sensation of something fracturing. My vision blurred, the world spun, and I succumbed to unconsciousness. Coming to, I found myself being hauled by the arms, my body dragged by someone panting laboriously behind me. The man was sizable, his muffled voice, referring to me, indicated his gender. I understood his intent was to end my life. Acting on sheer reflex, I twisted around and grappled with my assailant. He recoiled in surprise, tumbling onto his back. I leapt onto him, aiming for his throat, but the stranger swiftly rallied and delivered a blow to my head at the previous wound. Despite the searing pain, my grip on the man's neck only grew tighter. With a tremendous heave, he hoisted his leg and sent me tumbling. We rolled toward the lake, ending up in the not yet frozen part near the bank. During the fall, my attacker gained the upper hand and commenced choking me. I balled my fists and struck his ears. This brief distraction eased his chokehold, seizing the moment I snatched the knife from his belt, unsheathed it, and plunged it repeatedly into his side below the ribs. He let out a gaping cry of pain and gradually shifted away. I dragged myself to the shore, expelling water and desperately inhaling air. The man lay motionless. I left the corpse and moved warily back to the house. Slipping my hand beneath my arm, I retrieved my firearm. I endeavored to proceed noiselessly, yet my footing gave way on the icy stairs, injuring my foot. The pain was a harsh awakening. I felt a piercing cold as water from my drenched garments froze into icicles. Light spilled from the house, and the ajar door wafted out a warm aroma. I stealthily surveyed the living room. A man sat in a wicker chair with his back to me by the fireplace. To his left, Inga was bound to a chair, a trickle of blood staining her blouse from her bruised lip. She jerked in vain, the ropes holding her fast. "Settled down now?" inquired the man, back still turned, in a voice I knew. Ina's strained voice, laden with fury, retorted, "Idiot, you've ruined everything." I detected the man's self-satisfied chuckle. "You say that, yet you enjoyed it, right? You didn't resist and lay with me. You even thought a child might tie me to you." As he glanced back, I saw he was a notorious artist and womanizer. "Your father thwarted my plans, but I had my revenge, and you were none the wiser." The womanizer filled a glass with cognac. "Care for a drink?" he offered, though his tone was laden with despair. "There, you had a daughter. She was born strong." A simple exchange with the doctor, a sizable bribe, and some blackmail ensured his silence. "Your daughter was sold for her organs to a desperate couple. The sum they paid was generous, and they convinced you of her death. Even producing a death certificate, you lie." Inga strained against her restraints. Her sobs were unlike any I'd heard from a man. "Believe it or not, it matters little. Your fate's decided. We've disposed of your lover, and you'll soon follow. The ice hole's big enough for all." He took a swig of cognac and reached for his pistol. I chose that moment to act. "Up, hands on your head." "The police are on to you," I barked, emulating the tone of a tipsy sergeant before his troops. Caught off guard, the womanizer leapt up, upsetting the cognac bottle, and stared bewildered at me, and the gun pointed his way. "Hands behind your head and turn around," I roared on. As if driven by desperation, he raised his hands and turned his back to me. I swiftly entered and struck him on the head with my gun's handle. Indeed, Mount Zong's wisdom rang true. A gun commands authority, and though it was a pistol I held, not a rifle, the effect was much the same. The spirit of the ancient Chinese communist adage held firm. I released Inga. Her eyes met mine, filled with confusion, her mind reeling. It's true, such trauma could shatter a man's mind, and even more so for a woman, a mother. I poured some brandy down her throat and placed her on the couch, draping my jacket over her. I arranged Playboy's unconscious form in an armchair, tying his hands to the rests. I then stripped off my damp attire and positioned it near the fire to dry. A gun was set on the tabletop to perfect the tableau. Picture it myself in swimwear, facing a fully clothed alpha male, an intriguing scene for any onlooker. I grabbed the bottle cognac remained, and I took a hearty gulp. Playboy's eyes flickered as he came to, feigning ignorance. I tapped his face with my firearm. "Wake up, uncle, you despicable lecker. You've been eyeing me for far too long. It's repulsive. Where's..." Nicholas the commissioner inquired weakly. Am I not a sight with my athletic build? I mocked him. Your Nicholas is no more. I left him by the shore. Not to disturb his decay, another swig of cognac followed. Did you kill him? Indeed I did. Was that wrong? I feigned a drunken laugh. You're finished, understand? Your end is nigh. Playboy's limbs shook, as if to tear free from the chair. You won't get out alive. They'll shoot you for murder. I observed him, imagining froth at his mouth and smoke from his rear. It won't come to that if you confess everything. I stood up slowly. Who do you? I think you are. He jerked once more. Recall, I served in intelligence. We were trained in interrogation. A blow to his mouth with my gun's butt was the opening move. He coughed, teeth and blood spilling out. Fitting for an alpha male. The dentist will sort you out at a discount. An hour of intense questioning revealed all, including the maid Valentina's involvement. She had tipped off Playboy about his lover's absence. Inga, savvy banker, was on the verge of exposing him, prompting his drastic response. It's simpler, more efficient to eliminate a problem than to bargain. Once my clothes were somewhat dry, I dressed, took out my phone, and called the cops. At 3:30 a.m., a patrol car arrived, its red and blue lights piercing the darkness. With the officers, we returned to the city. They kept us in a holding pattern for nearly 2 days, finally releasing us with a caveat to stay in town. Crucial was the recorded dialogue between Ina, me, and the Playboy on my phone. Ina skipped work for a week. Her constant crying was a sorrowful sight. I kept a vigilant eye, fearing she might harm herself. The police's cursory check of the maternity hospital yielded nothing. The doctor was deceased, the staff long gone or retired. The case stalled. 2 months post our failed escape, Ina went back to work. I stayed by her side, yet our rapport remained unchanged. She was polite, but distant. A tough session was ahead, and by night I pored over my textbooks. One late March evening my son called. Dad, congrats, you'll be a granddad. Natasha's pregnant. Joy was an understatement. Yes, father, 4 months along, and you're only telling me now. I was wary of jinxing it. Have you told your mum? There was a pause from my son, then a sniffle through the phone. Edward, ring your mother. She loves you maybe even more than I do. I remember Ina's troubles. Just call her. You're her offspring. I doubt that. Fine. I'll do it a week later. Edward called to say he was coming to visit. Is it confirmed? I asked my landlady for a 3-day leave to be with my son and his spouse, and their lodging. She probed. They're hotel bound after one night. My own place I lack. How come? Michelle didn't move out. Such a tight wad. Ina quipped. I kept quiet. Let them stay here. My home's big enough for all. It'll be nice to talk to the young ones in my later years, Ina offered with a playful sigh. I stole a look at her. Ina had been non-confrontational lately, but I felt this calm wouldn't last, and soon I'd be tempted to join her in bed. At the airport the next morning I welcomed the kids. The drive to Ina's took an hour and a half. Father, will it be all right there? Edward seemed uneasy about staying with someone unfamiliar. His eyes sought mine for answers. Is there something between you two, Edward? Don't pester Dad. Natasha cut in. We'll figure it out when we get there. I caught her eye in the rearview mirror. It was like a bolt from the blue. Could this be real? I glanced at Natasha again as we arrived, unloaded their bags, and brought them inside the grand foyer. The kids were eager to explore the opulent house. Come in. Feel at home. Ina welcomed us with a smile, descending the staircase, but stopped mid-sentence, fixating on Natasha, clutching her chest. Oh no, it can't be. My child, my little one, she whispered. Ina began to faint, and I caught her just in time. Edward, help, I called to my son in shock. We settled Ina on the sofa. Grandma Masha, alerted by the noise, brought over water. Natasha, silent, stared at Ina, then turned a confused gaze to me. Natasha, it seems she's your mother, I said with a smile. Natasha sank to the ground as Michelle's voice rang out from the entrance. What unfolded was a happy resolution. Natasha was indeed the child who had been lost. For unknown reasons, her abductors had changed their plans and left her at an orphanage. Michelle and Ina soon stepped into grandmotherhood. Natasha gave birth to a healthy girl, and they named her Victoria, as you might guess. Edward mended things with his mother. He and Natasha moved into Ina's once quiet home, now filled with the baby's laughter. Michelle departed Shumsky a month later, taking my last name, perhaps she held out some hope. Ina hadn't lost hope either. As for me, I remained oblivious to these events, and frankly, I preferred it that way. I was on a fast train heading northeast across a vast country, to the rhythm of the wheels. The May sun climbed, the scent of blossoming rowan sharp in the air here. The mountain ash bloomed a bit later than in the central regions. Bird cherry petals drifted in the cool breeze. I walked on the spring earth, a gentle wind stirring the grass. The sap-rich aspens and young birches basked in the soft morning sun. I inhaled deeply the floral air, savoring my newfound liberty. It was morning, the morning of a man at peace. What do you make of our tale today? From my standpoint, the wife's behavior towards her husband was rather unsavory once more. A more amicable solution might have been found. What are your impressions? Please leave your thoughts in the comments. Look forward to new stories.